Jun, thank you very much for being on this Brainwave show with me this morning or afternoon your time. You're in Michigan, and I really appreciate that you do the work that you do as you're an assistant professor of human genetics at University of Michigan. And how did you first get interested in the field of neuroscience and understanding how the brain works in order to help people with, say, bipolar disorder, like you're working on right now?
When I was in graduate school, I didn't start out working in neuroscience. When I was in Henry Lester's group in Caltech, we study ion channels and receptors. The focus is very molecular, but I just gradually get drawn to this larger mystery of how channel proteins function in the brain and then how different brain phenotypes came about. So that really steered me toward genetics of mental disorders for my postdoctoral work.
So you've won the 2011 Johnson & Johnson / MHRO Rising Star Translational Research Award, and you're going to be doing research specifically in understanding the genetics of bipolar disorder. Can you explain a little bit about that for our viewers?
Right. So first of all, the research will be based on samples that have been collected by my predecessors, other colleagues in the field who really did hard work many years ahead of the time to collect the DNA samples. And I will focus on a subset of those gathered by the National Institute of Mental Health. I'll focus on families with multiple affected and across several generations. Specifically, I found families where there are at least two first cousin pairs who are both affected. The proposal is to sequence their genome, identify coding variants that are damaging for the protein, that are shared by the two cousins, and are private to that family. And hoping in this subset of variants, we might be coding the clue of the disease causation. Of course, there are risks. There are ways for this not to work, but given how hard mental disorder is to understand, and given how hard we have tried to study the genetics of bipolar disorder, this is something that many agree is the right thing to do, especially because sequencing is something that we can afford now. The scale of work that we cannot afford 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, sequencing has come down a lot in price, and it's easy to do. And there's these websites that offer sequencing to a small degree of patients or just people who send in DNA samples, such as 23andMe or Patients Like Me.
Right.
And it's amazing how easy it's become to do that.
Right. So collecting data is easy. Making sense of it will continue to be hard. But that doesn't really detract from the idea that we want to get the data in our hands. So holding the total information of the person's genetic variation. And then to face the next challenge, which is to tell which variants really matter. So I like to think of the day you go to the hospital, the nurse will take your weight, height, blood pressure, and your genome. Doesn't mean the information will be automatically useful. That's why we still have a lot of research to do. But now we have the capability to hold that information and then try to sort the information, figuring out which is noise and which really matter.
Yeah. And it seems like if a patient's genome is taken at a physical examination, then if that becomes more prevalent, it could be used on a large scale, not only for research but also for diagnosis. Once the research is done, to pinpoint genes that can be like you're doing, that can be significant risk factors for a psychiatric disease or any other disease.
Right. So it's already been practiced. A good doctor will ask you for family history because it has predictive value. The hope is we want to understand more about individual genes so that the total information about the variant can one day be even more predictive than your family history. It's not guaranteed. There are plenty of phenotypes that are not inherited, but to the extent that the trait is heritable and can be traced back to individual DNA variation, this is a promising direction to pursue.
And I know you study genes because, in part, it's the root of it's a large part of the root of a psychiatric disease. But you talked about interest in other facets of neuroscience that are kind of developing right now, in terms of like, say, gamma oscillations in the brain, or timing of signals in the brain not lining up to create mismatches in consciousness. And can you talk a little about that as well? That and the other fields that kind of interest you.
Right. My training is in genetics. I follow neuroscience from a relative distance now, and can only speak the layperson on how I'm fascinated by the idea that we don't quite know at which level we ought to be studying the brain. It could be small circuits. Even that we don't know. Are we talking about a 3-cell circuit or a 300-cell circuit? And then you mentioned timing. I'm fascinated by the idea that the mistiming of electrical signal between brain regions could be one reason that causes the mental disconnect or the confusion of self versus other. These are all fantastic ideas. Some of them are not subject to genetic analysis, so I would dearly hope to see how it plays out. Maybe brain imaging is a way. Maybe there is a new discipline, optogenetics, where you can manipulate small circuit in vivo. So these are newer tools that one of them will lead us to better knowledge. But to the extent that the character is inherited, we hope genetics can contribute to the advance of knowledge.
And that's a huge amount that these psychiatric diseases are inherited. We know, for example, from studies of schizophrenia that, like, if you have one twin or another identical twin, there's only a 50% chance the identical twin will have schizophrenia if one of them, the other one does. So we know, but that's still a huge heritable amount, and so we know that these diseases are highly heritable. So that kind of is probably something that made you interested in genetics as one of the roots of psychiatric disease, I would think.
Right. Those findings based on epidemiology is indeed one of the major reasons that we think genetics might get us there. That is to find the genes even before knowing in which part of brain they function or how they function. So this is the hope. It has succeeded in some fashion for single gene diseases. We've had plenty of examples of finding the gene before knowing the functional defect.
Like Huntington's disease, for example.
Right. We're still trying to understand the function of the Huntington protein.
Okay. So, I hope that someday that all these disciplines, genetics and the other ones we've talked about, will be able to kind of vertically connect, and we'll see a complete picture of how psychiatric disease and also just normal behavior and experience, evolve from the genes all the way through the whole process. And you of course are a large part of the origin of that someday happening in the work that you do right now. So thank you very much, Jun, for your work in genetics.
Thanks, Brandon. Let me just mention I always had the wonderful opportunity to work in great collaborative groups with wonderful colleagues and senior mentors. I also want to thank you for your effort and for your family foundation, not only for supporting this project, but for supporting psychiatric research in general. It's really much appreciated.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. My whole family would say the same thing. I mean, it means so much to us see how this research can evolve to help people with psychiatric disease, and we're all part of the whole team, the whole cause together, you and us and everybody working on it and everybody who lives with diseases. So Jun, thank you for being on Brainwaves today, and I hope that people have some questions for you online.
Okay, thanks, Brandon, for the opportunity.
You're welcome. All right, I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.